IT guy, but I figured I could at least help somewhat.
Well, it was odd because, I was been on Zoom all day today, and then it wouldn't let me in. So here we are.
It was telling you that you've had enough for the day.
I guess so. I've hit my quota.
All right, gang. Welcome to another edition of the Sports Management Club at IUPUI's virtual speaker series. Today on tap, we have Chris Panyard, who's the Senior Director of Operations for let me see if I get this right, Indy College Football Playoff Incorporated.
You got it.
Correct? That's what I thought. All right. I wanted to make sure I got that title and actual organization name correct here today. So Chris is a local guy. All right. He's coming from here in Indy. He's an Indy guy. So I'm going to let him kind of take over and tell us a little bit about his background, what brought him to where he is kind of today, and then we'll get into some conversation.
Sure. And thank you, guys. Thank you, Dr. Sherman and Kyle, for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. As Dr. Sherman said, I'm Chris Panyard, Senior Director of Operations of the Indy College Football Playoff for 2022. I am a local guy, born and raised here in Indianapolis. I attended North Central High School. I graduated there in 2008 and then went to Indiana University in Bloomington. There, I started off as a business major, but quickly just wanted to put my passion for sports to use. So I switched over to the sport management program my freshman year and ended up with a minor in business. And at IU, I was pretty involved there on the sports scene. I worked with the IU Student Foundation, which is a group that plans and executes the Little 500 bike race. I also worked in the IU athletic ticket office for all 4 years, which was a great opportunity, learning customer service and problem-solving skills, and obviously the opportunity to work on game days at Memorial Stadium and Assembly Hall. But my big break, I would say, was I was really fortunate. The summer before my senior year was the summer of 2011. You guys are a little bit younger, but you may know that Indianapolis hosted the Super Bowl in 2012. And so I was really fortunate at that time to land an internship with the 2012 Super Bowl host committee. And that was, like I said, the summer before my senior year. And that was a fantastic opportunity that really taught me a lot about event execution. And I learned just a ton of what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do, which is equally valuable in the internships. And I must have done something right, because at the conclusion of my internship, my boss, who's actually also my boss today, Susan Boffman, she's the president of the 2022 Indy College Football Playoff, but she was also my boss at the time. She had offered for me to stay on as a contract employee. And so we worked out a little deal where I went back to school in the fall, graduated a semester early, and then started working the next day with the Super Bowl host committee as a contractor. And I worked there December of 2011 through Super Bowl Sunday. And then after that, I guess I like to move on quickly. The Monday after the Super Bowl, I started a job with the 500 Festival locally here as their logistics coordinator, and did that spring of 2012 through the Indy 500 into June, and then moved over to an internship position with Lucas Oil Stadium that summer, which is another fantastic opportunity, just learning the ins and outs of how a building operates. And while I was at the internship, I was really fortunate that the 500 Festival called me back and said they had an event coordinator position open, and would I be interested in applying. So while I didn't anticipate leaving my internship early, I had an opportunity to get a paycheck and insurance and get off my parents' insurance and payroll there. So they were excited. So I switched back over to the festival mid-fall there in 2012 and worked about 14 months full-time there. All the while, my goal was to get back to Indiana Sports Corp. And so Indiana Sports Corp was the sister company of the Super Bowl host committee. However, Indiana Sports Corp had their their events that they had to execute and make good on, the ones that they had bid on, the Big Ten championships in football and basketball, several NCAA championships. And so that's why the Super Bowl host committee was a separate entity. But I wanted to get back to ISC after that experience. It was just such a great group of people. And so I had stayed in touch with Susan Boffman while I was at the festival. And about 14 months into that job, she reached out and said, hey, we have an event manager position. Would you be interested in applying? And that was my goal all along. So I remember writing down one of my goals in college was to work for ISC by the time I was 30. And I was really fortunate to get that opportunity when I was 24. I'm 31 now. So I ended up getting hired at the Sports Corp and worked on their event team for 6 years, first as a manager, then as a director, and got to work on the 2015 men's Final Four. I also had several NCAA championships that I oversaw from our side, from the host side, and then also oversaw Indiana Sports Corp's fundraiser events, which you may or may not be familiar with. I bet some of you have probably volunteered with them, but the Indiana Sports Corp Corporate Challenge, the Indy Ultimate Urban Adventure Race, and the Inspiring Sports Charity Golf Tournament, formerly known as Youth Links. And so I was, like I said, there for 6 years. And about this time, a little before this time last year, I was just kind of looking for a change. Susan had already moved over to the Indy College Football Playoff to be the president. And I shared with her, we're friends and peers, colleagues, but also friends. So I was just sharing with her my desire to make a change. And she said there might be an opportunity on her team. So I jumped over, I interviewed and went through the process and jumped over to the Indy College Football Playoff January 2nd of this year. So I've been here just over 10 months and really excited for what we're going to be able to hopefully execute on January 10th of 2022. So I know that was a long-winded introduction, but I remember being in your shoes on these panels when I was in college, and I was always intrigued on how people got to where they are. So I thought I would add a little extra detail there this evening. So thanks.
Extra detail is not, we love the extra detail. We like to get into the nitty gritty of things. So you're going to find that out real quick. So you actually came to IU not long after I graduated from there. So that's always good. Actually, I didn't graduate. I left and then graduated when you came in. Okay. So you kind of worked your way up, right? You're kind of the classic story of working your way up through into what I think many of these students might think is a really, really big position, right? So kind of talk about how you transitioned. The 500 Festival is a bit different than, a place that people would think to start. What made you want to start there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a friend whose father worked at the 500 Festival as the director of operations, VP of operations. And so I had known about the festival even as a middle school kid. And I always just thought that Kelly's dad's job was really cool. And so I paid attention, and we stayed in touch. And that's really what got me interested in the festival. But I knew more about it probably than your average person. And so for those who don't know, the festival is a not-for-profit organization located here in Indy, and they are responsible for all the events and programs that lead up to the Indianapolis 500. There's about, between the events and programs that they do, people don't quite realize this, and not in a COVID year, obviously, but they actually execute between 40 and 50 events and programs leading up to the 500. So I'll tell a quick story that relates to this on why I wanted to work for the festival. And it was in 2010, Indianapolis was hosting the Final Four. I was in college and volunteered for the Indiana Sports Corp. And I really just, the light bulb went off in my head when I was volunteering at the Final Four. I volunteered for an event called The Dribble, which is a crazy event where 2,000 kids are given free basketballs, and they dribble a mile throughout downtown Indianapolis on the streets.
Chaos ensued, I'm sure.
It's chaos, organized chaos. But at that moment, as I'm volunteering, I'm chasing balls into the street and trying to protect little kids from getting hit by oncoming traffic. The light bulb went off, and really the motor started turning in my head on, you know what, somebody had to inflate all 2,000 basketballs, and somebody had to order all 2,000 t-shirts. And it was the logistics that started to blow my mind when I started to realize all the work and preparation that went into this one event. And so a cool story is 5 years later, when we hosted the Final Four in 2015, the next time I was the event manager in charge of the dribble. So think about that 5-year time span. I'm volunteering. I don't really know what I want to do quite yet. I know I love sports and events sound cool, but I don't really know what that means. 5 years later, I was in charge of the very event that sparked my interest. And so it was that experience at IU that made me know I want to go into an event management. And that was why I chose the 500 Festival, because I knew they had those awesome events such as the mini marathon, which at the time was the largest half marathon in the country. They have one of the largest parades in the country behind, I think, Macy's and the Rose Bowl. And so I just knew it was a great opportunity to jump in. It wasn't maybe as known as some of the others. And so I thought I had a better chance of actually getting hired. And it proved my theory, I guess, proved to be accurate, because I got that gig, and it really propelled the rest of my career to this point.
And you ended up being the guy blowing up the balls the second time, right?
That's right. Yeah. Think about when someone tasks you with inflating 4,000 basketballs. I think I said 2,000. For the women's Final Four, it's 2,000, but the men's, it's 4,000. So it's quite a few. It's quite the task.
That sounds like quite the task that I don't really know if I'd want to deal with that or not. I can't figure it out. So let's step back real quick to the Super Bowl internship, right? Biggest event, basically, I mean, this side of the Indy 500, right? Most media coverage comes with it. You had a role there. What was your role, and what would you say is a nice story that comes out of your time as part of that committee?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my role, I was in the Super Bowl host committee was broken up into like 10 or maybe half a dozen, 10 or 12 different divisions. I was in Division 6, which was Super Bowl Village. And so you guys are probably familiar with Georgia Street, downtown Indianapolis, between Pennsylvania, Bankers Life Fieldhouse, and Capitol Avenue at the Convention Center. And we were tasked with building out, actually, we weren't tasked with by the NFL, but we proposed that we would build out this fan village. And so it ended up being a huge success. And I was on the team that helped plan that. It was pretty eye-opening and challenging, because at the time, Georgia Street just used to be a normal street, 2 lanes each direction going east and west. And they transformed it based on the bid to this quasi-event space. And so I was on the team that helped plan Super Bowl Village. And the best part was that when they asked me to come back, not only was I part of all those meetings in the summer before, but like I said, I got to come back and actually see it come to life, which was super exciting. But one story that I have from the Super Bowl internship has nothing to do with sports or the event itself. And this was an awesome thing that happened, and very fortunate. The dice kind of rolled my way. But one day, our president, Allison Melanchthon, had a sinkhole in her parking spot. And Allison, at the time, she's the busiest person in the city of Indianapolis. She doesn't have time to be worrying about whether or not she can park in her parking spot. Well, my dad actually happened at the time to own a very small asphalt company. And so I got word that the sinkhole was happening, and I went to my boss and said, hey, I can actually fix that. And I can be there tomorrow morning with a truck and with concrete and asphalt, and I can take this problem away. And so my boss was like, are you serious? I'm like, I promise, I know how to do this. And so he's like, okay, let's give it a shot. And so he met me the next morning with a blowtorch. I pulled up with one of my dad's trucks and a truck bed full of equipment. And I fixed Allison Millington's sinkhole in her parking spot. And I think, wow, that's an interesting story and a unique thing that happened to me in my internship. The point there is I was just ready and willing to jump in wherever I was needed, right? Sinkhole has nothing to do with Super Bowl Village. They probably didn't know I had the skill set to fix a sinkhole, but as an intern, I heard there was a problem. I came up with a solution. And I think honestly, at that moment, I really gained a lot of respect from the staff because they saw me out there as they were walking into work with my steel-toed boots and my goggles and my nasty-looking jeans, and I'm throwing asphalt in the sinkhole. And so I think I earned a lot of respect from Susan at that moment. I think at that moment people thought, "Wow, Chris Panyard, he's the real deal. He's here to work, and he'll roll up his sleeves and do whatever is asked or not asked of him." And so I hope that story just encourages you all to be willing to do whatever in your role. You may be hired to do one thing in your internships or your jobs, but not being too good to roll up your sleeves and jump in and help whatever team you're on to get the task done. And so I've never forgot that moment, and I think that really helped me earn some respect and gave me some kudos by the staff and move on to my next roles.
That might be one of the coolest stories I think I've ever heard. You fixed a sinkhole and you're working for the Super Bowl. That's not two things that I would expect to go together, but I love the message in it, needless to say, right?
That's right.
That's the whole point, is the message, right?
Yeah, the message is just be willing at any time to do anything.
Even lay asphalt.
That's right.
If you have the skill set.
I had the skills, I had the resources, and I put them to use.
Wow, that's awesome. That's such a good story. So, okay, now you shifted over to Sports Corp, right? And with that said, and obviously there was some kind of tie-in there with people that kind of got you into that role or helped get you into that role. And students, don't be afraid to drop questions in the Q&A anytime. But you got merged into that role, but was there people along the way that kind of were the catalyst for that?
Absolutely. Like I said, Susan was someone that I stayed in touch with, and that was so important. Even while I was at the festival, I wasn't annoying. I wasn't emailing her every day, right? But we stayed in touch. She was someone that I respected. She was someone that was willing to invest in me when I interned at the Super Bowl. And so when I was at the festival, and when I was in these other roles at the stadium, etc., I was staying in touch with my Sports Corp contacts. And so Susan Boffman was one of them, and then Marcy Ahern is one of them. Marcy is now at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, along with Allison Millington, who I mentioned earlier. But just the importance of building your reputation early and then never burning your bridges, right? I've had the opportunity to work for a lot of wonderful bosses. I've had some bosses who I haven't loved, but I have really tried hard to never burn my bridges, whether it was my favorite person or least favorite person to work with. If and when you get your foot in the door in this industry, you'll learn quickly that it's a tight-knit industry, especially within whatever city you're working in. Especially in Indianapolis, we pitch ourselves as one of the smaller big cities, but we're big enough that we can execute these big events. And so everybody knows everybody in this community, whether you're in the hotel side, the venue side, the sports commission side, or you're a vendor. It's very tight knit. And so not burning your bridges certainly has paid off for me, as Susan has now hired me 4 different times.
4 different times. Wow, I guess she's your person.
I've got one believer. I must be doing something right in her eyes.
All right, so let's rewind one more time, right? I'm kind of leafing through your LinkedIn profile at the same time as kind of talking to you and hearing what you're saying. And I want to step back to when you worked at the convention center in Lucas Oil Stadium. You didn't just do sporting events, I'm assuming, as part of the ICC and LOS, right? I'm guessing that you had roles with the convention center events as well. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And that internship was so valuable for me. It taught me a lot, and it taught me what I didn't want to do. I loved the internship itself, but it quickly taught me personally that I didn't want to work for a building, for various reasons, right? But I did get the opportunity to work on a lot of different cool events. And so not just your typical sporting events. And in fact, I was actually there in the summer of 2012 when, we weren't quite into Colts season yet. And so my first big event was the Tim McGraw and Kenny Chesney concert. And so that was really a neat experience just to see all the planning that went into that. I worked several of the band competitions that are hosted at Lucas Oil Stadium, which was different for me. I'm unfortunately not musically talented at all. So that was a little bit of a different world for me, but it was good event experience. And what I learned is that whether it's a sporting or event or a band competition, a concert, the event management part is pretty much the same. People want to get into sports events, and they think, some naively might think, I'm going to hang out in the suite and entertain clients all day. You quickly learn that that's not the case. You rarely end up watching the event unless you're doing something like Dr. Sherman, where you're doing stats and things like that. But if you're in the event management side of it, you likely aren't seeing much of the competition itself. And so that's very true, whether it's a concert, a band competition, anything else that might come through the building. A lot of corporate events, weddings on the field, even diehard Colts fans wanting to get married at 2:00 on a Tuesday on the field, have at it. But really a good experience to get a wide variety of events under my belt.
So the differing roles, building operations, logistics coordinator, event management, how are those different, and what similarities exist between all of those roles? Because they sound different, but there has to be some tie-in there.
Absolutely. So the big difference from like the building side versus a role I'm in now, or when you're with a sports commission, is the buildings, while they are working on the big events far out, a year out plus, they're also, in a non-COVID environment, they're churning through events every week. In Bankers Life Fieldhouse, even more so than the stadium, it's just smaller, so concerts can come in and out in 24 hours versus the stadium. It might take a week to build out a 60,000 person set for a concert. But the building life is different because you're churning out events constantly. And so you need to know, you need to retain the information for the events you're working on further out. But my colleagues and peers at the field house, they work hundreds of events a year. And so a big difference when I was at the Sports Corp and the festival is you're really focused, on a handful of events for that entire year. The difference is you're the owner of it, right? So you're planning every minute detail. You need to know the ins and outs of every aspect, from sales to operations, marketing, all of it, where the building is just focused on the operations part. And so that's the biggest difference, I would say, between the role I'm in now versus the building type role that I had as an intern, and that my counterparts have at the stadium and the field house. But the similarities are the same, right? Being detail oriented and having good communication skills is imperative. If you can communicate well, you will be successful in any field, in my opinion. Now, obviously, there are fields that you have to acquire specific knowledge, doctor, accountant, things like that. But in this industry, a lot of what we do is diving into the details and communicating those to our partners, and then building on that process each month until we reach the finish line. And so that is the key component. I think no matter what side of the equation you're on, if you can communicate well and have that keen eye for detail and know when to say, hey, this is not going to work. You guys are saying that the volunteer entrance is at this door, but we have the band coming in this door at the same time. We got a problem. It's that type of detail that you need to acquire, and also to be able to effectively communicate. I think that's the biggest key and the biggest similarity across the board, no matter what type of job you may have in events.
So we've gone through your history a little bit. Now let's get into what I think some of the people in attendance want to hear about, and that's what are you doing now? What is
Yeah.
you've got this senior director title for what is basically the second largest sporting event, to come to Indy other than the 500. That's kind of like the one that's just outlier. It sits way
Sure.
out there compared to others, but this will be the second largest, I think, massive sports event. What do you do now?
Yeah, that's a great question that I get asked all the time. And as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, I was brought in January 2nd of this year. And so we're hosting the national championship game January 10th of 2022. So what does somebody do for 2 years? And that was a big reason why this event was attractive to me, because I got the opportunity to work on one event for 2 years. It was better work-life balance for my personal life. But for 2 years, what does someone do? Well, and you won't be able to see this in detail, but this is a chart I've been working on all day today. And this is our org chart for our event execution division. And so I can share this with Kyle or Dr. Sherman or previous versions to share out, just to give people a good sense. But these orange and yellow and gray boxes, they all represent different committees. And so I'll just read a few of these across the top here, just so you get a good sense. But under my staff oversight, obviously I'm just one guy, so I'll have a ton of help from a volunteer and city support. Includes airport operations, volunteer operations, lodging, team and game operations and services, facility, so all the planning on the Lucas Oil side, the layout of the championship campus, which includes events like the Playoff Playlist Live, a free concert series, Playoff Fan Central, which is the free fan fest, and the championship tailgate, which is controlled by ESPN, all the hospitality functions, and then finally the legacy events for the CFP Teachers Foundation, which include a 5K, a teacher summit, etc. And so a lot of what I'm doing now is we are trying to get the right people in place to fill these committee roles. And we're going to be launching what you've probably heard is our local organizing committee or our host committee. And we're hoping to get that off the ground here in the next month probably. But we are building our local organizing committee or our Indiana host committee right now. So that it looks like lots of meetings with lots of different community volunteers or people that will be on the committee based on the function of their job, right? So we'll have some people from the police department on there because of the function of their job, but we also might have people that work for Salesforce. They have nothing to do with the CFP, but they are community-oriented folks that want to be involved and will volunteer their time to help us on the marketing. And so it looks like a lot of meetings and planning, and I've probably had 15 different versions of this chart, and it changes by the hour every workday. And so right now it's a lot of that. Once we get the host committee launched, I will be responsible for checking in with all the committee chairmen and co-chairs and just making sure that they have what they need and seeing if they're running into any roadblocks or needing more support from me as a staff person that was hired to support them. Once the calendar turns to 2021 and they get through Miami, hopefully, right? That's where they're projected to have the game. We hope and think that will happen. The national CFP office out of Irving, Texas, Dallas suburb, will start focusing on Indianapolis. So they'll come to Indianapolis once a month, every month leading up to the game for a 3-day session of meetings. And they'll set the agenda each time, and we'll meet. We'll have probably a dozen meetings over those 3 days or more. And we'll try to make progress each month. And then in between those monthly meetings, we have our action items. And so you have about 3 weeks in between to hit your deadline for the next month. And so that cycle is very similar to how a lot of these mega events operate. It's how the Final Four operates, and it's how the All-Star game was operating before it was paused, and it's how the college football playoff will operate as well. So you have these marks each month where you try to hit your goals and your deadlines and make your decisions, and then move on and move a month closer until event time.
That sounds like quite the job. I'm just going to put it out there. Just sharing that organizational chart was enough to give me pause. I'll just put it that way to you. So perusing your LinkedIn, I'm noticing a role with your church. And
Yes.
I want to sports. You don't necessarily think that much about work-life balance, other than usually you can't do it, right? And you've been involved with it so much and in so many different areas. How are you making that time for students that want to go into sports full time? They hear from people like me who 10 years in the business, and I was like, man, I'm burned out. I don't, my family, blah, blah, blah. And now though, you're someone that seem to have made it work to where you're balancing your personal interests with your professional life. How do you do that? And what types of tips would you give students that want to do that?
Yeah, Dr. Sherman, I'm so glad that you brought this up because I don't think it's talked about enough, or at least it wasn't when I was at IU. You as a sport management major or an aspiring sports professional, you hear that you're going to work a lot of hours. You hear that you're going to start with low pay. You hear that it's competitive and that everyone and their brother wants to get in. And that's kind of hammered on you. And you say, yeah, but, right? Like, yeah, I hear you, but I still want to do it. But I'm so glad you brought this up because the work-life balance aspect is so critical just to my overall well-being, right? Dr. Sherman mentioned my church. So, I'm a man of faith and that really, that's number one for me. That's the most important thing in my life. And I'm not really shy about that. And so I'm 2 years into marriage also, and we have our first child on the way in April, which is exciting and scary. But it is so important. And I have just really made it a priority to my employer who has supported it. Obviously I didn't take a job in sports expecting to work 9 to 5. However, they basically know that outside of event time, no matter what we have going on Monday nights, I got to be in Carmel at 7 p.m. because I'm involved in Young Life, which is a ministry, a high school Christian ministry through Carmel High School. And we also lead a small group at our church every Wednesday night. It's just a small Bible study of about 10 to 15 people. And so just knowing where to draw the line. Early on in my career, I really got burned out pretty quickly. I wanted to prove myself, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's something to be said, right, for being the new guy. You don't want to be the last one there and the first one to leave as the new guy. But I thought by emailing my boss at 11 at night, I was showing him or her how dedicated I was, when really I was just annoying the crap out of them. And it really, I think they just felt like I was inefficient with my time, because why am I working at 11 p.m. when I had the whole workday? And so that's just something that with your experience, you'll have to learn how to balance, but it's important just to learn when to say no. And it's important, whatever it is for you, right? For me, it's church and faith and Young Life. You have whatever else in your life makes you tick. And so identify what those are and stay true to them, because you can and will get burned out if you let your sports job consume you. It just will. And you'll never feel like there's enough hours in the day, but at some point you just gotta say, you know what, I've hit my limit for the day. I've done the best I can do. And it's time to go home to my family, or it's time to go to my ministry, or it's time to go, whatever it is. Like I said, identify what those things are and stay true to them. And hopefully, you can have those conversations. I had conversations with my employer early on that just said, hey, these are the things that are important to me. I'm going to give you everything I got, especially during event time. I'm obviously going to be there, but on a normal work week pattern, I'm going to make time to do these things. And they support that. They encourage that. They know that they want me to bring the best version of myself to work. And so that's what helps me do that.
That's an awesome answer. I love to hear that. I went through the same thing personally. So Kyle, I'm going to hand it to you. I see we've got a question in the chat. I'm hoping that some more people will drop some questions into the Q&A for Chris, because, you got a pretty important guy in front of you. Start asking the questions, and he seems to have some pretty sage advice. Kyle?
All right. Well, actually, from from a work-life balance and an intern at ISC, I need to know how many or how you did so many miles in the corporate challenge, because in the office, we were wondering as to why we were so far behind, and you were actually competing with teams by yourself.
I'm a man motivated by competition, so I was getting up pretty early in the 5 o'clock hour with my headlamp, logging some miles.
Yeah, I don't even think I reached 75, and you were well above 200, I think.
It was pretty fun.
But anyway, looking back on planning for the 2022 college football playoff, are you guys preparing for COVID regulations, even though this is an event that is a year and a couple months away from actually happening?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. It's a fair question. It's definitely in the back of our minds. We're fortunate of Indy's Big Three, unofficially called the Big Three, when we landed the All-Star game in February of 2021, the Final Four in April of 2021, and then the CFP in January of 2022. Obviously, those three mega events, big feathers in the cap for our city within a 12-month span, was huge. We're fortunate that of those three, and I hate it for my colleagues and peers, but we have the longest runway, right? And you guys have probably seen the news the last couple of days, Pfizer's news and Lilly's news. Lilly was approved for better treatments of the virus, and then Pfizer, 90+% effective rate of their vaccine, which is encouraging. But obviously no one has a crystal ball. Nobody thought we'd be in this until November 11th and beyond. And so we do have to plan for that. Essentially, I think what we're going to be planning for is three scenarios, which adds layers to our job, but it'll make us better in the long run. We'll have to plan for a full fan event, which we hope and pray is the case. We'll have to plan for a limited fans event, which is probably realistically, if you social distance well, it probably doesn't mean 50%, it probably means 25%. And then we have to plan for a no fans event, which stinks, and I don't think that's going to happen in over a year from now with what's developed in the medical community as it relates to treatments and the vaccine. But we do have to be diligent. We feel for our friends in Miami who are hosting this event 2 months from today. Much different scenario for them than it is us, and they have a guy on their staff that just did all the same work, right? And so each host city and host committee does the same planning, and so they were sitting in my shoes on November 11th of 2019 thinking they were full steam ahead, right? And so it would be naive to think that we're just going to plan like the vaccine's going to work and we're going to have 68,000 fans in Lucas Oil. I am optimistic that we will have a great event. I do think we'll be able to offer our free concert series and our fan fest and hopefully a mostly full stadium. But as our planning ramps up those monthly cycles that I mentioned earlier, that will be part of every conversation.
How about your colleagues at ISC? They've been part of the All-Star game, gone, the Final Four, who knows what's going to happen, the Big Ten stuff. What kind of, have you been in touch with them about that and kind of been like, what's coming down the pike?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I have been in touch. I have a lot of really near and dear friends at the Sports Corp. And even though my office is in the Visit Indy office now, I see and talk to them regularly. Obviously a very tough year for them. They lost, in the middle of they got the women's tournament under their belt. Some of you may have helped volunteer with that, but in the middle of the Big Ten tournament, the plug was pulled. And then subsequently, just about every event after that. They are a resilient bunch, though. They hosted the corporate challenge virtually, which Kyle was jabbing me on before we got into the Q&A. And they were actually able to do the Indy Ultimate in person with a little bit of a different structure, socially distant. And fortunately, the health of the organization was strong, and they haven't had to furlough or lay anybody off, which is, I think, pretty rare. Especially the Sports Corp is one of the largest, if not the largest, sports commission in the country in terms of staff people, about 25 staff. Most sports commissions are 10 or fewer, so they're fortunate. They're healthy enough to be able to retain their staff, and I think that's helped keep their morale high. They're a resilient bunch, and they're just moving forward in 2021 with optimism, right? They're going to host some version, we hope, of the Big Ten football championship in December. I think it'll be a couple weeks after it was originally scheduled. And then they're doing the same thing with the Final Four, planning for the 3 scenarios of full fans, limited fans, and no fans. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be, realistically, it's going to be some version of limited fans. Probably not as optimistic as we are for the CFP, but I do think with the way the NCAA is talking, there's a chance they might be able to do some cool and different things with more of the tournament than they had expected. I'm not saying that more games are coming to Indy or not, but it's been speculated in the news, and they're open to that idea. The NCAA hasn't said anything to this point, so don't go tweet that Chris Panyard said NCAA Indianapolis is hosting the entire tournament or anything crazy like that. But just being flexible, they're flexible, they're optimistic, and they're a great group of people that will overcome.
Are you good, Sherman? You good? All right. So looking back on planning the college football playoff, is it hard planning an event that is over a year away?
That's a good question. I don't think so, really. I think because you have so many different milestones that you have to hit regularly, whether that's an upcoming board meeting or a host committee meeting. A host committee meeting with 150, 200 people on your host committee, that in and of itself takes time and effort. It's like a mini little event just to plan that, planning your agenda, your speakers, and then trying to do it in COVID, right? So I think there are enough little milestones along the way when you're working on a mega event such as the CFP National Championship or the Final Four or the Indy 500 or whatever the big event might be. There are enough goals that you have to hit along the way where it's not like, oh, this is a year away, it doesn't matter. Once you've been through it, you realize you'll quickly fall behind if you don't stay on the schedule that was mapped out or that is being mapped out for you by the event rights holder. In this case, it's the CFP, and in the Final Four case, it's the NCAA. They have metrics and they have deadlines that they have to hit and that the host, they expect you to hit. And so it does sound daunting to work on an event for a year or two, but just like any job, you have goals, you have deadlines, and it becomes a nice flow. So I wouldn't say it gets boring or it's challenging. It's exciting.
So then, is there any difficulty planning? I guess this is for any event, when the teams are revealed, like just prior to the event happening?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that can be a big challenge that we run up against. If you've been to a mega event, you'll notice that a lot of the rights holders are very big on making it custom to the team, right? So if you go to the Final Four, you're not just going to see NCAA logos everywhere, right? You're going to see school logos of those 4 schools. And so you have to kind of plan your outlines, and then usually what ends up happening is when you get down to 8 or 4, or when you get close to knowing what teams are coming to your city. So let's use a Big Ten football championship game, for example, just because I've done that 6 or 7 times now. Usually that final weekend of the Big Ten football season, we are getting updates from the Big Ten saying, okay, here are the scenarios of who could clinch and how. And so we're working really closely with Sport Graphics or our signage vendor to determine, okay, we know what sign's going in this location and we know the specs of it, the dimensions. We just don't know what the content looks like yet. So they'll map out all the basically 6 different, if say there's 6 teams that could clinch that final weekend, you would map that out and you would actually have proofs developed for any scenario. That way, once a team wins and clinches, you are ready to go. And then usually it's on at that point. You're communicating directly with the team right away. There's a pre-planned call. In many cases, and I'm kind of learning the CFP's process, but they actually have advanced meetings that happen for the teams that are in the semifinals. And they actually bring all 4 to Indianapolis ahead of time. And so they can see the hotels, talk to the contacts. This is getting into the details, but that's what it takes when you don't know the teams till the week or 2 prior. They'll bring the contacts in, so they'll know the city, they'll know the hotel arrangements, we'll get their logos. All of those things are done in advance, and then it's kind of, you just drop it in once it's confirmed. So you definitely don't wait until you know who the 2 are to start planning for those signs or those hotel contracts or whatever. Those are thought out months in advance, and then it's just a matter of drag and drop, if you will.
Well, and people like Chris, and people in ISC, the Final Four, I mean, you find out 2 weeks ahead of time. The regional, you find out a week ahead of time. The first, second round, you find out a week ahead of time. So
Right.
Imagine having a week as opposed to a month to figure out how are we going to get these, teams in here.
Exactly. You're exactly right. Yeah. Selection Sunday, you could be hosting a first and second round game on Thursday. So absolutely.
So then, when planning for the college football playoffs, how closely do you work with previous cities that have hosted the event?
Yeah, that's a good question, because in my line of work, the other host cities are our competition, right? Indianapolis, when we bid to host a mega event like the CFP, we are bidding against New Orleans, Atlanta, New York, Chicago, you name them. We're LA, Vegas. We're bidding against those cities. And each city is trying to come up with the sweetest package they can to offer to the rights holder. In this case, it's the CFP, to make that attractive for them to come to our city. And so there is some competition there. There is a level of not wanting to show your cards because you don't want anyone to know what you're willing to offer, right, in your bid. And so there's that level of it, but also there's I would say the sportsmanship side of it, right, where, hey, we're all in the same business, right? Or every host city has to work with the CFP, which is a great staff, but there are challenges of working with the rights holder. So sometimes, like, I had a call with New Orleans to say, okay, what were your challenges from the CFP side? What are some things that I could expect? And so there's some give and take there, right? They're our competitor, but also they're friends in the business, they're friends in the industry. And it's we do sometimes share best practices type thing or information, but I will say we don't share is the things that are unique to our city or something that might be confidential for an upcoming bid, things like that. So there's give and take. And then before I conclude with this answer, I'll just throw in there that most mega events have what they call a future host program. Unfortunately, in Miami, it's been canceled for this year, but I would be going to Miami with all the future hosts 2022 and beyond. Forgive me, I forget the cities that are immediately following us, but there's LA is one of them, and I forget the other. But the future hosts would all be in the same room, receiving the same information, and sharing best practices. So that's an opportunity. Usually at the event, you would meet your peers in the other cities, talk to them, see what works, what doesn't in their city. But ultimately, every city is so unique that really helps, right? I mean, we can't do in Indy what they did in New Orleans. We don't have Bourbon Street. We don't have the French Quarter. So we're going to come up with different things to keep fans excited. And so that's what's cool about the fact that they move these events around from city to city and don't keep it in the same spot every year.
And what a lot of people don't recognize is that Indianapolis, and going back to your time at the Super Bowl, we were the jumping off point for the NFL to create the Super Bowl Village. We were the first ones to do it. And Chris was one of the ones that made that happen. And now it is a requirement in the bid for every city to put in for the NFL. So that tells you how crazy that is.
Yeah, big feather in Indianapolis's cap on that one, right? We literally rewrote the manual to host the Super Bowl, and since the Super Bowl Village was so successful, seeing over 1 million visitors over 10 days, the NFL's eyebrows raised and said, "Wow, if Indianapolis can do this in a cold weather city, then we are going to make Miami and Tampa and New Orleans and all the other cities that want to host do something similar." So yeah, we really did. We rewrote the bid specs, which makes us feel very proud. I think I wasn't there for when we presented it, obviously, as an intern, but I think when we originally presented the idea that, hey, we're going to throw a 10-day festival and we're going to get 1 million people and we're going to bring a zip line and all these top level acts, and we're going to do it as the host. We're not asking you and your sponsors to do it. We're not asking the NFL to put staff force to help execute this. We just need your permission to do it, and we're going to do it. And they kind of laughed at us, from what I've heard, and we made it happen. So that makes us feel very proud.
So looking back on the logistics of the college football playoff, with it being pretty far out, how do you decide when to have certain conversations such as sponsorship, security, talking to hotels, and conversations like that?
Yeah, that's a good question also. A lot of those conversations are driven by the CFP, the office staff. Their staff is about 25 people, and they get into a rhythm, right? And so, like I mentioned, those monthly meetings, they sort of, now that the CFP is 7 years old, they have a rhythm of, okay, by January the year before, we're going to have these meetings. And then in February, we need to have these meetings. And then, so on and so forth. In November, we're going to have our final security tabletop exercise where we talk through different scenarios that could happen and see how the agencies would respond. And so they have a good cadence of what those meetings are. From a local standpoint, it's trying to figure out who your problem children are going to be, right? You kind of try to anticipate what the CFP is going to ask, but also, hey, last year at a different event, maybe at the Big Ten or NCAA, whatever, we had an issue with this hotel. They got the BEOs wrong, or they didn't deliver, the food was cold or whatever, And so you just try to figure out and identify what your problem children are going to be locally and try to get ahead of those. So that's how we will determine our local meetings that we need to have far out. And then from the national standpoint, we kind of wait until they set those agendas each month.
So you keep mentioning the college football playoff office. So what's the difference between them and then you guys, and how do you guys work together?
Yeah. So there is a staff of 25 people in Irving, Texas that work for the CFP. And those people are full-time employees, and they work on every CFP. It's unique, and I know we're kind of limited on time here, so I won't get into the nitty-gritty, but similar to the NCAA owns the Final Four, the CFP, really it's the conferences plus Notre Dame own the rights to the college football playoff. Won't go into the story of how we got there, story for a different day. But just like the NCAA staff exists, there's a CFP staff. And so those people, those 25 people, are responsible for planning and executing every college football playoff every year in every city. I am on the local host committee, the 2022 Indy College Football Playoff. So something scary that I haven't mentioned yet is that I left my sports corp job to take this role. My job ends. I essentially signed a contract, and in March, roughly March 15th of 2022, my job ends and I have to go find work. I did that knowingly and willingly, and hoping that my hard work would speak for itself, and hopefully I'll have something lined up in advance. but there is a distinct difference. I won't work on this event beyond Indianapolis, where my colleagues in Irving are working on LA for the next year, and they're working on Miami this year, and that's their full-time job. For me, I get to work on this once, and then hopefully I'll land somewhere so I can feed our new young baby child. Kind of scary.
So what other challenges has COVID brought to your job? Obviously, you're planning for an event in 2021, but has COVID brought any other challenges to your job besides planning for the event?
Yeah, I think just the not being in the office every day and being able to pop into someone's cube or desk or office and ask a question. I think there are a lot of benefits to this work from home environment that we're all experiencing. On one hand, it saves you your commute time, and you can do laundry while you're in a meeting and, go for a walk at lunch or whatever, which is cool. But I do miss the element of being around my colleagues every day in the office. We're kind of in a hybrid mode right now. A few days in the office, a few days at home. Although I think due to our pregnancy, I'm gonna be a little more cautious moving forward. It might be at home throughout the winter, but I think that's a big challenge. I think Zoom is a wonderful tool, but I don't think it replaces that in-person interaction. We're, traditionally we try to have this big rah-rah, exciting host committee meeting with all these committee members, because not only are they experts in the areas, they're subject experts in the committees that they work on, but they're also, every single one of them is a community ambassador for our event. And so it's not as exciting, in my opinion, to have a Zoom meeting with 100+ people and get them pumped about being on the committee for the CFP versus getting everyone in the same room and going through the reports and updates and sharing the exciting plans we're going to roll out. And there's that element of it that is challenging and that I miss, and that I hope, with some of this news of a vaccine, that we can, we'll be able to, maybe for our final host committee meeting in 21 before the 22 event, we'll be able to have all those people in the same room and thank them and distribute uniforms and some swag. But that personal element, it's important, and it makes it challenging not having it.
So my last question before I hand you back off to Dr. Sherman. Obviously, you were pretty involved as a college student. So how would you recommend students, especially college freshmen, get their name out there in the sports industry?
Yeah. Yep. So don't want to at all discount the importance of the educational aspect and going to class and keeping your grades high, because that's super, super important. So don't hear me wrong on that. But if that's all you are doing, you are not doing enough. If I'm hiring an intern or an entry-level position, and someone had straight A's, in their sport management major, but no experience, and I have someone who, had a 3.0 or above, or kept A's and B's, whatever, kept their grades good and respectable, but has a resume full of real life experience, I am picking that person every single time. And so again, I am not discounting the education part of this. Please go to class. Please study hard. Please keep your grades up. But it is not enough. If you're just doing that, you're behind. And I know you guys are all friends with each other, but you're also, every single one of you is each other's competition. And you got to look at it that way. And when you see your peers getting jobs in the athletic office, or volunteering for the sports corp, or putting the Final Four in the Big Ten or the NCAA swimming championships on their resume, and you're just hanging out, you're falling behind. And so you got to look for every single opportunity to gain experience. And what is it that you can put on your resume and talk intelligently about in an interview, and say, here's what I did, here's what I learned, here's what made me better. Because you're not going to learn all that in a textbook, right? You're going to learn a lot in the classroom, and you have wonderful professors. And candidly, I think IUPUI sport management program is better than Bloomington's right now. I think it's awesome. I think the fact that you guys are in Indianapolis gives you a huge leg up on those Bloomington students, because all the events are here, right? I mean, they have the IU events, but you guys have all these mega events in your city. And so if you're not taking advantage of that, if you're not volunteering for the 500 Festival, for the Sports Corp, for Visit Indy, you're falling behind. You know, Kyle, I know you're involved in the Sport Management Club, obviously. I think you're the president. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Yeah, and so if you're not following Kyle's footsteps there, you know, getting involved in the club, you are behind if you're just going to class, plain and simple.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. And you know what? I'm a IU Bloomington grad, and I'm here to tell you that we are a leg up on them, because you actually had to come up to Indianapolis to actually get a broad level of experience. And a commonality between the two of us is that we both worked in the athletic ticket office in Bloomington. And Mark Bowman, by the way, you remember Mark Bowman? Yep. He's
Mark,
a good friend
Holly,
of mine.
Mike Roberts.
Yeah. You were there with Mike and Holly. Yep. All of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I love to hear that coming from people that are in the industry, because that tells you that I think it validates what we're trying to do here. And Kyle's one of the ones at the front of all of this. So, okay. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to add a new element to the speaker series. Kyle, you don't know about this because I didn't tell you. So the new element is going to be rapid fire. We're going to get to know Chris a little bit better. Okay.
I like it.
So I'm going to rapid fire you some questions. All right. The first one, and you got, let's just say 3 or 4 seconds to respond. Favorite movie?
Remember the Titans.
Favorite food?
Pizza.
Favorite color?
Crimson.
Favorite moment in sport? That one might take a little longer.
Yeah, I got to think.
Doesn't have to be one you were involved with. It could be that you're a fan or anything like that.
The Watt shot.
The Watt shot. IU gotta be an IU one, right?
I was there in the front row with the Watt shot all day.
See, I'm just making up stuff off the top of my head. I'm throwing at him, but I've heard that is fun to do, and I enjoy doing it. So I'm going to come up with a bunch more. Chris, you were my pilot, so I'm going to be doing this much more. So I always end. Right. We're nearing the conclusion. I always end with allowing you to kind of just take the mic and tell us a parting shot. You kind of did a minute ago, but I think there's more that you want to be able to divulge to students. So your parting shot, word of wisdom, advice, tip, trick, anything you can think of, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, I did it a little bit a moment ago, saying how you have to be involved. And I talked about the importance of communication and just being a good communicator that will lead to success in most industries, but especially this one. But I think what I will say is, when you're in your internships, you need to be hungry. You don't want to be the type of intern that just gets a task done and then sits there on Facebook or Instagram or your phone or whatever until your boss comes to check on you again and give you a new assignment. You want to be the type of person that is anticipating the tasks and assignments and next steps of your supervisor. You know, maybe you attended a meeting and you heard some action items that came from the meeting that you can help with, and you say, hey, you know what, I heard they mentioned this. Can I get started on that for you? Trying to be a step ahead is just so key. And like I said, with the example of the sinkhole, being willing to do anything, the other duties as assigned category. Maybe you were hired as the marketing intern, but they need help at the warehouse. You know, be willing to go there and unload trucks or sort apparel or whatever it is. Those are the interns and the employees that always stand out. Those are the ones that, you know, hopefully I'll get to hire 1 or 2 people before this thing is all said and done to help on our staff. And those are the types of people, you know, that were at the Sports Corp when I was there that come to mind that I will reach out to and say, you know, this person didn't just wait for their next assignment. This person was a team player. They were always eager for the next thing. They did assignments that they anticipated I would ask them to do, or things that I just didn't think to ask them to do that were helpful. They jumped in and helped other departments, other staff members, and just we're eager to learn and to grow. And so I think if you can take that advice, it should carry you a very long way.
That's awesome. I love that advice. Be hungry. That's what you can take from here. Be involved and be hungry, right? Thank you to Chris Panyard. We want to say thank you one more time. I would say everybody give him a round of applause, but we're all imagining clapping right now. So we'll just go with that. So thank you again, Chris, for joining us. Next week, we've got the next edition with Mike Mendolia from the Seattle Mariners. He's a premium sales account executive coming on at 5 o'clock on Wednesday, the 18th. Join us, sign up, register on the link provided. Kyle will be providing that, I'm guessing, on the GroupMe app, as well as somewhere on social media at some point, I'm guessing. I don't know for sure. I don't follow the social media as much as I should, but at the same time, I know he will share. Thank you again to Chris. Thank you, Kyle, for co-moderating this with me, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys. Keep up the great work.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Cool.
Perfect, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me. Really do. It was a lot of fun.
I'm under the impression that you didn't do stuff like this when you were in Bloomington, because I don't remember doing anything like this.
I didn't. No, and I'm serious. I really think the being involved in the program. I've spoken several classes over the years, Dr. Pierce and others, and I just think, if I were going to college tomorrow, I would